The courtroom is silent. The air feels heavy. All eyes are on the young black man sitting at the defense table. His hands are folded, his posture tense. He glances at the jury, then at the judge. His future depends on what happens next. Across the room, the prosecutor leans back in his chair. His suit is crisp, his expression smug. He glances at the defendant and smirks. To him, this case is already won. He doesn't even try to hide his amusement. The judge sits high above them all. His face is unreadable. He has seen many cases before, but something about this one makes him watch closely. His hands rest on the bench, fingers tapping lightly. He listens. He waits. The jury shifts in their seats. Some look bored, others seem unsure. They have heard part of the case, but the prosecutor's confidence makes them think the outcome is clear. The defendant's lawyer straightens his tie. He knows this fight won't be easy. The prosecutor is respected. Known for his aggressive style, he wins cases without mercy. A woman in the audience whispers something to the person next to her. A bailiff glances at her, and she quickly stops talking. Outside the courtroom, the world keeps moving, but inside, time feels slow. Every second stretches. Every movement is noticed. Then the judge clears his throat. The room stiffens. The case is about to begin. The judge picks up a document and glances at it. Then he looks at the prosecutor. "Mr. Carter, you may begin." The prosecutor, a middle-aged man with slicked back hair, stands up. His movements are slow, deliberate. He buttons his suit jacket and steps forward. His smirk remains. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he begins, his voice smooth and confident. "This is a simple case. A case of crime, of justice, and frankly, of common sense." He pauses, looking directly at the defendant. His smirk widens. "The man sitting before you," he says, gesturing toward the defendant, "was caught red-handed. The evidence is overwhelming, the facts are clear, and yet we are here wasting time pretending there is something to debate." He chuckles softly, shaking his head. A few jurors glance at each other. Some seem convinced. Others remain neutral. The defendant swallows hard. His lawyer leans in and whispers something, but he doesn't respond. His fingers grip the table. The prosecutor continues. "The defense will tell you a story, a tale of misunderstanding, of injustice. They will try to convince you that this man is a victim." He lets out a small laugh. "A victim," he repeats, shaking his head again. The defendant's lawyer frowns but stays silent. He knows how this game works. The prosecutor walks slowly across the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, I ask you, do we ignore the truth? Do we let criminals walk free because they claim they were in the wrong place at the wrong time?" His voice grows sharper. "Or do we uphold the law?" He turns back to the judge. "No further statements for now, Your Honor." The judge nods. "Defense, your turn." The defendant's lawyer stands. The prosecutor sits down, crossing his arms. He leans back, completely at ease. He's already convinced he has won, but the judge watches him carefully. His face remains neutral, but his eyes are sharp. The case is far from over. The defense attorney stands up slowly. He buttons his suit jacket, takes a deep breath, and steps forward. His expression is calm but firm. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he begins, his voice steady. "You've just heard the prosecution's version of events. A version that sounds simple, even obvious, but real life isn't that simple." He glances at the defendant, who keeps his eyes down. "My client, Darius Cole, is not a criminal. He is a young man who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. The evidence against him? Circumstantial at best." The prosecutor smirks, but the defense attorney ignores him. "Let me tell you what really happened," he continues. "Darius was walking home after visiting his mother. He stopped at a corner store. Moments later, police rushed in and arrested him. Why? Because he happened to fit the description of a suspect." He pauses, letting his words sink in. There was no video evidence, no fingerprints, no stolen goods on him, just an assumption based on nothing more than appearance. The jury listens, some leaning forward. The defendant's hands rest on the table, fingers slightly trembling. "Witnesses saw what happened," the lawyer continues. "They saw the real suspect running from the scene. They saw the police grab the first young black man they found. That man was Darius." The prosecutor chuckles under his breath. The defense attorney turns to him. "You find something funny, Mr. Carter?" he asks. The prosecutor raises his hands in mock innocence. "Just an interesting story, that's all." The defense attorney nods. "That's exactly what the prosecution wants you to believe. that Darius's story is just that. A story. But it's the truth. He walks toward the jury. And the truth deserves to be heard. The judge watches closely. His expression remains neutral, but something flickers in his eyes. The courtroom is silent, waiting for what comes next. The judge leans forward slightly. His hands rest on the bench, fingers tapping. He has seen countless cases, but something about this one feels different. Prosecution, he says, turning toward Mr. Carter. I have a question. The prosecutor looks up, still smirking. Of course, Your Honor. The judge glances at his notes. You claim the evidence is overwhelming, yet I see no fingerprints, no DNA, no surveillance footage clearly identifying the defendant. Can you explain why this case is so simple to you? The prosecutor's smirk falters for a second, but he recovers quickly. He clears his throat. Your Honor, eyewitnesses placed the defendant at the scene. That alone. The judge raises a hand, cutting him off. Eyewitness accounts can be flawed, Mr. Carter. People make mistakes, especially under stress. The room is silent. The prosecutor shifts in his seat. He wasn't expecting to be questioned this way. The judge turns to the defense attorney. Does the defense have witnesses? The defense attorney nods. Yes, Your Honor. Multiple witnesses saw another man fleeing the scene. They are willing to testify. The judge looks back at the prosecutor. Did the police pursue this other suspect? The prosecutor hesitates. He glances at his notes. Your Honor, the police? Did they or did they not? The judge interrupts, his voice calm but firm. The prosecutor sighs. No, Your Honor, they did not. A murmur spreads through the courtroom. The jury exchanges glances. The prosecutor shifts in his seat, his confidence slipping. The judge's fingers tap against the bench again. His expression is unreadable, but his silence is loud. The defense attorney remains calm, watching. He knows something is shifting. The judge is paying attention. The prosecutor looks away, suddenly less sure of himself. His laughter from before now feels out of place. The tension in the room thickens. Something is coming. Something no one expects. The judge exhales slowly. His fingers stop tapping. The room is silent, waiting. Then he speaks. Mr. Carter, he says, looking directly at the prosecutor, do you believe in justice? The prosecutor blinks. He wasn't expecting that question. He forces a smile. Of course, Your Honor. The judge nods. Then, as an officer of the court, you should have no issue with uncovering the full truth. The prosecutor shifts in his seat. Your Honor, The judge raises a hand. Enough. His voice is calm but firm. The prosecutor immediately falls silent. The judge turns to the defense attorney. Call your first witness. The defense attorney stands. Your Honor, I would like to present security footage from a nearby store, taken at the exact time of the incident. The prosecutor stiffens. He wasn't aware of any footage. The judge raises an eyebrow. You have footage? The defense attorney nods. Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution failed to include it in discovery, but we obtained a copy. The judge's gaze sharpens as he looks at the prosecutor. Mr. Carter, is this true? The prosecutor swallows hard. He glances at his papers, flipping through them as if searching for an excuse. Your Honor, Answer the question, the judge interrupts. The prosecutor exhales. Yes, Your Honor. We had the footage, but it was unclear. The judge leans forward. Unclear to whom? The courtroom is completely silent. The jury watches closely. The defense attorney steps forward. Your Honor, this footage clearly shows another man fleeing the scene. It proves that my client was not involved. The judge nods. Play the footage. A screen lights up. The room watches as grainy footage plays. A man taller, wearing different clothes, runs from the crime scene. He disappears down an alley. The defendant is nowhere in sight. A collective gasp spreads through the courtroom. The jury looks at each other. The audience murmurs. The defendant closes his eyes, his hands trembling. He knew he was innocent, but now everyone else does too. The judge turns back to the prosecutor. Mr. Carter, explain to me why you proceeded with this case despite having this footage. The prosecutor's face is pale. He opens his mouth but says nothing. The judge exhales. I thought so. His voice is sharp, disappointed. The courtroom is frozen. No one expected this. But the judge isn't finished yet. The prosecutor's face is drained of color. His hands grip the table, as if searching for stability. He opens his mouth, then closes it. There is no excuse. No way out. The judge studies him, eyes sharp and unblinking. Mr. Carter, he says, his voice steady, did you deliberately withhold this evidence? The prosecutor clears his throat. Your Honor, yes or no? The judge interrupts. His tone is calm but firm. The prosecutor hesitates. He looks at the jury, then at the audience. The weight of their stares presses down on him. He finally exhales. Yes, Your Honor. His voice is barely a whisper. A wave of murmurs spreads through the courtroom. The jury members exchange glances. The audience leans in, whispering. The judge's expression remains neutral, but there is something in his eyes. Disappointment. Disgust. Mr. Carter, the judge says, do you understand what you've done? The prosecutor swallows. Your Honor, I thought. You thought you could win? The judge finishes for him, even if it meant destroying an innocent man's life. The defendant's lawyer folds his arms. His face is unreadable, but his silence speaks volumes. The prosecutor looks down. The arrogance, the smirk, the confidence. It's all gone. The judge turns to the jury. You have just witnessed an attempt to manipulate justice. A man nearly lost his freedom because of bias, arrogance, and dishonesty. The prosecutor flinches at the word dishonesty. His career, his reputation, everything he built is now crumbling in front of everyone. The audience watches in shock. The jury shifts in their seats. The moment is heavy, filled with unspoken words. The judge leans back in his chair. His face is calm, but his words carry weight. This is not how the law works, he says. The prosecutor doesn't look up. He knows he has lost. And he knows this is only the beginning of the consequences. The judge takes a deep breath. He looks around the courtroom, letting the silence settle. His gaze lingers on the prosecutor for a moment before he speaks. This court is not a game, he says, his voice steady. A man's life was nearly destroyed today. Not because of evidence, not because of guilt, but because of arrogance and prejudice. The jury listens intently. The audience is silent. No one dares to speak. The judge turns to the defendant. Mr. Cole, you have been wrongfully accused. You were treated unfairly by the system that was supposed to protect you. And for that, this court owes you an apology. The defendant swallows hard. His hands tremble slightly, but he nods. He doesn't speak. He can't. The weight of everything is still sinking in. The judge's eyes shift back to the prosecutor. Mr. Carter, you have not only failed in your duty as a prosecutor, but you have disgraced this courtroom. The prosecutor's head hangs low. The smirk, the confidence, it's gone. The judge exhales. Effective immediately, I am referring you to the State Bar for review. You will answer for your actions. A murmur spreads through the room. The prosecutor's face turns pale. His career, his reputation, everything he built is slipping away. The judge then looks at the jury. This case should have never made it this far. Justice is about truth, not personal victories. And today, truth was nearly buried under lies. The weight of his words fills the room. The prosecutor remains silent. The defendant stares ahead, his eyes filled with emotions too heavy to express. The judge picks up his gavel. The case against Mr. Cole is dismissed. He is free to go. He slams the gavel down. The sound echoes through the courtroom, a beat of silence, then whispers. Movement. The tension in the air begins to break, but the prosecutor doesn't move. He knows his time here is over. And the judge, he simply watches. Because justice has spoken. The gavel's echo fades, but the weight of the moment lingers. For a few seconds, no one moves. No one speaks. The air feels thick, charged with emotions too heavy to ignore. The defendant, Darius Cole, stays seated. His hands are still on the table, his fingers pressing against the wood as if to make sure this is real. He looks at his lawyer, searching for confirmation. It's over, the lawyer says softly. Darius exhales. His shoulders drop. For the first time in weeks, the weight of fear begins to lift. The audience murmurs. Some shake their heads in disbelief. Others nod, as if justice has finally done what it was supposed to do. A woman in the back wipes her eyes. The prosecutor, Mr. Carter, remains frozen. His mind races. His career was built on confidence, on winning. But now, everything is crumbling. The judge's words replay in his head. Disgrace this courtroom. He slowly stands. His hands tremble slightly as he gathers his papers. He doesn't look at anyone. He can feel their eyes on him, their judgment pressing down like a weight he's never known before. The judge watches him but says nothing. There's nothing more to say. Darius's lawyer pats him on the shoulder. Let's get out of here. Darius nods. He pushes his chair back and stands. For the first time, he looks at the jury, the people who almost believed a lie. Some avoid his gaze. Others give him a small, silent nod. As he turns to leave, his eyes meet the prosecutor's. For a moment, there's nothing but silence between them. The same man who once laughed at him now looks away, shame written all over his face. Darius doesn't say anything. He doesn't need to. He walks past the prosecution table, past the jury, past the rows of spectators. Each step feels lighter. He's free. The heavy doors of the courtroom swing open. Sunlight pours in from the hallway outside. The air feels different. Lighter. And as Darius steps through those doors, leaving the courtroom behind, he knows one thing for certain. He was supposed to lose today. But truth had other plans.